At the time of Kasim's death in 1523, the Kazakh state spread from the Ural River to the lands of Semiresh and north to the Irtysh River. In the 16th century, the Cossacks focused their expansion on the Syr-Darya region, the Talas and Zarafshan River Valley, where they sought to inherit Uzbek domination. The territory of Kazakh control was not precisely fixed, reflecting instead the ability of the various Khans to combine military success with personal persuasiveness. Kasim's successors were unable to maintain the unity that he had achieved, partly because they were less forceful rulers and partly because Kazakh territory had increased greatly during the last 25 years of Kasim's lifetime. Consequently, immediately after Kasim's death, the three Kazakh hordes were important as political entities. A single, unified Kazakh state as such did not then exist. However, one of the Khans generally functioned as the preeminent authority or military commander for the whole Kazakh nation. Kasim was succeeded briefly by his son Mamush, who was killed while trying to consolidate his authority. His successor Kasim's nephew Tahir, reigned 1523 to 1533, attempted unsuccessfully to gain control of Tashkent. After Tahir's death, Buga, reigned 1533 to 1538, came to power but ruled in alliance with two other powerful Khans of the day, Ahmed Khan, Western Kazakhstan, and Tugan Khan, Semiresh. During the second quarter of the 16th century, the Cossacks received additional immigrants from the Dashi Kipchak. The steppe economy flourished as the political stability of the steppe allowed the reintroduction of trade through the area, providing incentive to rebuild the cities Siganak, Syrom, and Yasi. By the end of the 16th century, they had become walled towns with brick structures and served as centers of exchange for the Cossacks and traders from Kashgaria and More Anna. The growth of these cities provided expanded markets for the Cossacks, which in turn encouraged an increase in the size of the average herd and the general improvement of the Kazakh economic position. In 1538, Har-Nazar, a son of Kasim, came to power, and in the 1550s he expanded the borders of the Kazakh state by absorbing the eastern section of the Nogai territory. In the late 1560s, unsuccessful in this attempt to conquer Mukhlistan, Har-Nazar turned his attention toward the trading centers in the Syr-Darya region, which had been thriving in the peaceful and lucrative 1560s and 1570s. It and a group of Kazakh sultans swore loyalty to the emir of Bukhara Abdul II, the preeminent political figure in the area, and they supported Abdul's claims against Baba Sultan of Tashkent. In 1580, after receiving some cities from Baba Sultan, the Cossacks briefly switched sides. But once their control of the new territory was consolidated, they again took up the Bukharan cause. Har-Nazar was killed in battle in 1580. He was succeeded by Tahir's nephew, Shigai, reigned 1580 to 1582, but it was Shigai's son. Tawakkul, reigned 1586 to 1598, who was the effective leader of the Cossacks. Tawakkul defeated Baba Sultan in 1582, whose head he exchanged with Abdul for the Zarafshan River Valley. Shortly after this he broke with Abdul. In 1586 he was origin of the Cossacks' 25 elected Khan by the Cossacks and led them in their struggle for control of the cities of the Syr-Darya River basin. By the end of the century the Cossacks controlled the cities of Turkern, Tashkent, and Samarkand, and they had even managed to capture Bukhara, for a brief period of time. Tawakkul died in 1598, after taking Tashkent, and was succeeded by Esim, reigned 1598 to 1628. In his first year of rule, Esim concluded peace with the emir of Buer Abdullah, who recognized Kazakh control of the Syr-Darya region. The peace achieved was short-lived. Abdullah died in 1598, and Bochi Muhammad, reigned 1599 to 1605, the first of the Muhammad dynasty, chose not to recognize Kazakh hegemony. A far graver threat to the Cossacks was the rise of the Kalmyk state in the east, which by 1630 contained western Mongolia, the High River region, and part of eastern and southeastern Kazakhstan, the eastern portion of Semiresh. In the early part of the 17th century, the Kalmyks, pastoral nomads of Mongol stock, began migrating in sizable numbers into the lands just east of the Cossacks. Attracted by dye goods traded in the Seer dye cities, they began periodically to attack the cities as well as the Kazakh population whose herds grazed on the periphery. The economic balance of the steppe was quickly upset. The number of caravans crossing the Kazakh steppe was sharply reduced. The decline of trade in the Seer dye cities led the Cossacks to the cities of More Anna for their goods, which they raided when their attempts at conquest failed. Florio Beneveni, the Russian ambassador to Bukhara during the first decades of the 17th century, reported that the whole area was a turmoil of periodic fighting between Afghans, Russians, Kavans, Bukharans, Karakalpaks, Cossacks, Kyrgyz, and Kalmyks. The major east-west trade routes had moved. The relative isolation of Central Asia forced all the constituent states and peoples to vie for the limited economic resources available. The Kalmyks, fattened by the Kazakh animals they had seized, continued to grow in strength until, by the last quarter of the 16th century, they were the dominant military force in Central Asia. With over 100,000 armed fighters, they turned their strength against the Kazakh state and seized Kazakh pasture lands. By the late 1620s, the Kalmyks were established along the Omi, Tobol, Ishim, and Irtysh rivers, which placed them in direct contact with Russian settlements in Siberia. The Russians were determined to maintain peaceful relations with the Kalmyks, since the Russian forces were thinly strung from the Baltic Sea to Siberia and the Kalmyks were not considered a serious or direct threat to Russian plans. In fact, a group of Kalmyks in Nogai territory actually came under Russian rule during this period. Russia's primary interest was to have a pacified steppe, so the Russians watched anxiously but quietly as the Kalmyks began a systematic conquest of the Kazakh steppe in the last quarter of the 17th century. The Kalmyk leader, Kungtaji Bator, attacked southern Kazakhstan in 1643. His forces were held there by the Kazakh Khan Jongir, Esim's successor, but before Bator had briefly controlled Semiresh and the lands of the Great Horde. Before the Kalmyks could attack again, however, the Manchu dynasty came to power in Peking, which supported Khalkha Mongol claims over the Western Mongols, including the Kalmyks of Jungaria. The Kalmyks became involved in fighting in the caste, and so it wasn't until 1681, having in the interim been forced to recognize Manchu suzerainty, that they renewed their attempt to gain control of southern Kazakhstan. The Cossacks, led by Jongir's son, Khan Tauk, reigned 1680 to 1718, were unable to protect their lands. From 1681 through 1685, Kungtji Golden, reigned 1671 to 1699, gradually took possession of almost all of southern Kazakhstan. He razed the cities, Syrom was completely destroyed, and controlled the caravan routes, effectively ending all trade through the area. Zhuang Rabtan, reigned 1699 to 1729, crossed the Sisi River and with his troops simultaneously invaded the northeast region of the Middle Horde and surrounded Khan Tauk's headquarters near Turkestan. Representatives of all the Kazakh clans and tribes gathered in the Karakum Desert, so managing to hold out against the further expansion of the Junga state until 1716, when Kazakh resistance faltered before renewed Kalmyk offensive. The Kalmyks crossed the Ili River in that same year and reached the Iagos and Asi rivers in 1718. In 1716 to 1718, the Russians introduced a string of forts on the edge of the steppe, in southern Siberia. The construction of the so-called Orenburg fortified line was an expression of Russian concern with developments in the steppe, a concern which was heightened in 1723, when the Kalmyks crossed the Karatau to take control of the Talus Valley. The Cossacks were caught by surprise as they prepared to leave their winter campsites and fled, leaving most of their possessions and livestock. This attack began the Akhtab-and-Shubarindi, the Great Retreat. During their subsequent campaign, 1723 to 1725, the Kalmyks quickly captured the Syr-Darya River basin from Yasi to Tashkent, forcing the Cossacks to flee from their ancestral pasturelands. The clans and tribes of the Great Horde migrated south into the disputed territory between Khiva and Bukhara. Most of the middle and small hordes, led by Khan Abulkar, reigned 1718-1749, migrated west and northwest toward the Russian-held lands along the Ember, Ural, Lik, and Ui rivers. The Kalmyks continued to absorb territory. In 1728 they took over the land around Lake Tengiz, so posing a direct threat to Khankent in the south. They also took control over Lake Balkhash and the lands of the small and middle hordes in central Kazakhstan. Tasks for seminar. Ethnogenesis and ethnic processes in the territory of Kazakhstan, customs, cults, beliefs, ancient tribes and formations, Usyun, Kangali, Kamaks, Kipchaks. Self-independent work No. 5, Pause, 2, Theme, The Decline of the Kazakh Khanate. Assignments, prepare the presentation on the theme Batters. Heroes' presentations should consist of more than 10 slides.